Hey, Matt.
Hey, Mike.
It's time for a podcast. Not going to ask. I'm just telling now.
You're correct.
Welcome to Hacking the Grepson, a software development and technology podcast where I, Mike, talk with that other guy, Matt.
Hey, that's me.
About software development and programming and subjects therein. Today we're going to talk about, we're going to get back to nature.
I love nature.
We're going to talk about some, ways, some ecologies, some environments that you could talk about, that you could spend some time in. We're talking about forest versus desert.
Oh.
You know, there's trees in one, there's sand in the other, but honestly, I'm not super in. I don't know a lot about this, so but we do have a blog post. Should I read the opening paragraph of each, and then Matt, you can just use that as a springboard to go right off on what the heck does that even mean, desert versus forest?
We can try.
Okay.
Also, I happen to really love forests in real life, and I just spent a bunch of time in a desert like a week ago, so this was particularly relevant.
See, he does the homework for this podcast. I did neither of those things. Okay, so when it comes to software design, a desert, according to this post, they refer to a desert. In a software desert, we travel by force of will under an oppressive heat with saddlebags stuffed to the brim. I love this already. There is no room for error in the desert, no opportunity for good news, no time to revisit a place we have already been. It is very important that we know how long the journey will take, even when we aren't sure that where we end up will be any better than where we started. Sounds a little bleak.
Yeah, it also sounds like the software development that I've done at most places that are just like, go, go, go. We need to get the next feature out. Got to make money.
Yes. But
which is not a successful approach in my experience, just FYI.
Okay. That's one opinion on desert. But you know what? I see some trees up ahead. For some reason, there's a forest in this desert. That doesn't make any sense. But so in comparison to a desert environment of software design, we have the forest, and some of us have experienced it once upon a time. There was a team that just worked, a company where things were built in small, safe steps, and we architected as we went along. A time, a whole group of people shared a clear goal, and we were all going after it as best we knew how. A place where on-call was no big deal because we didn't have bugs to be paged about. Sounds dreamy. I can hear the morning song of the birds already.
I have gotten close to the forest, I think, once. And it was when I was leading a team, and I happened to care about a lot of the stuff that just is in the forest stuff. But yeah, the talk about the forest is really interesting. They don't super define it on this page, but there's an entire blog series about this, some of which we're definitely going to cover in future episodes. This one just kind of touches on them, but that's all we want to focus on for this one is what do they mean by desert? What do they mean by forest?
Yeah, those descriptions are quite vivid and kind of abstract, and I'm kind of curious, Matt, what is your take on what that actually means to, develop in a software desert? What does that mean?
That is, I think, what most people are doing. Most software developers, I think, are falling into the desert, which is a very practical, pragmatic, we got to get this done approach. It's one that usually, and they touch on this in one of the blog pages later on, it usually comes from pressure from the top of the company, right? They are interested in their shareholders, and they're interested in making money for those shareholders, right? That is the drive.
Capitalism's bad.
I didn't even have to say it. Money is the driver for most companies. I think a vast majority of them. And sometimes that can be handled in a way where you can separate the engineering concerns from the money and kind of have like a synergistic relationship between executives or between the X team and the engineering folks.
The people telling you what to do and the people doing it.
Yeah. And I think desert, as I understand it from reading through this, is basically you don't have time to really refactor. You don't have time to really think things through. they do an odd combination of processes in this conversation. Like some things that I associate with waterfall, a lot of things I associate with waterfall, they put into desert, but also a lot of things that what was the word I just used? The processes, right. So the process in the forest is it has a lot of agile, but again, some of that's in the desert. So you've got waterfall and agile and no process, I think all kind of fall into the desert aspects of it. And then the forest is a more process light approach, but with certain fundamental like tenets and goals to it because the goal is more of a ecosystem for working on the software that you're all building together rather than a how do you do it, right? Process tends to be very dictated at you. Like this is how you do things to do this well. And there's a reason for that, which is otherwise you have anarchy, and most people don't thrive under anarchy at all. They will, if you're not staffed correctly, i.e. you have jerks on your team or you just don't have enough people, either of those or both, you will end up in the desert. No doubt in my mind. But the forest, if I understand what they're doing, actually I'll read this page, or I'll read some of the bullets here. On, I don't know, one of the later pages is called Fruits and Roots. And they talk about the fruits of the forest, i.e. what the benefit of working in that is. And I think it's nebulous to try to explain the forest difficult because it's nebulous, because it's really, again, it's about goals, not about practice. So it's harder to define. So they've got some of the fruits here, and these are all in comparison to the desert whenever there's a comparison being made here. 0 bugs, which we'll absolutely have another podcast on. I have a lot to say on that one. Forest delivers sooner. You do deliver more often, more value. You deliver good news to your customers, and et cetera, right? You're not delivering the like, yeah, we put a patch out, right? It's not those, and it's not making things worse. It's actually making the product better, right? I see a lot of times where companies will try to make products better, but they do that. That's a secondary goal to, again, making money. Good news, no blockers. Your team can kind of do stuff on their own. They focus on or include people who will be affected by the software written. That's hard to do in real life, I think, but like the kind of team I work on right now, which is an internal tools team, I do that.
Yeah.
It focuses on skills, it focuses on learning. You do a lot of demos so everyone can see what's going on, experimentation, and the last bullet they have here is joy. Forest projects elicit laughter and satisfaction on the part of all participants. So again, most of these are, I think, aspirational goals.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think about all that?
I mean, it seems like, it feels like the person who wrote this, I don't know exactly who they are, but I'm assuming they're a developer of some sort, or designer. It seems to be painting the desert in a negative light and the forest in a positive light. Not 100%, but it's like like you said, a lot of teams are in the desert, but they're aspiring to be in the forest. Like, like the things where you're giving good news to people as opposed to, oh no, we had another issue, or yeah, we just made a bug fix. And demos and experiments. That's another one that I thought was interesting, that you're constantly being able to try things out. That makes me think of like a more modern software, like a Facebook or a Twitter when they were in their heyday, constantly doing experiments with users, whether they liked it or not, whether they knew about it or not. But like
a lot of A/B testing with that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, A/B testing, just trying, like being in a place where you have your stuff together so well that you don't need the kind of stuff that you associate with the desert. It makes me think of like the beginning of a software project where you're mainly putting out fires.
Yes.
And you don't have like a good infrastructure. Maybe you don't have good CI. You don't have a lot of tests. You're just basically working to stay above water. I mean, maybe then ocean would be a better metaphor than a desert.
I actually agree with that. Like I feel like the desert is more of a drowning experience. You're doing what you need to survive. And I guess that's kind of true in the desert too. I think that's kind of where they're going. Like the desert is surviving, the forest is thriving. Is kind of I think that's the dichotomy they're trying to make here. And I agree with that general concept. I don't know if I agree with the metaphor itself exactly, but I'm going to choose to ignore that. You said one thing that I do want to make a slight clarification on, though, which is that they seem to think, you said that they're treating desert as bad, and I don't think they actually are. They're just treating it as not as good as the forest. There's
Worse.
praise for people who work in the desert several times, and there's a graph at some point in one of these pages that talks about like relative maximums, right? So it's like if you're working on desert, like as you start to move towards forest, there's this like degradation in what you're doing as you're trying to like pick up this new process or whatever. And so people, they get gun shy. They start to move towards forest and they're like, nope. And then they just go back up. They're like, this works. And they even inverted the graph on that one. And then they start talking about like where you have to climb out of the desert. And that made a lot more sense to me. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I get where you're coming from. So it's like, it's a valid development practice, but it's not as enjoyable for us people in the trenches, the desert trenches, I guess.
Using the same charts that you're talking about, because I'm looking at that, the attracted to the desert or the forest. I mean, there's still, desert is always on the left, and I'm assuming it's moving from left to right. So like, no matter how you're getting to the forest, it's like you're trying, like you're trying to, you end up in the desert, or you are using the benefits of the desert while you're in it, but you're still aspiring to the forest, but sometimes you get there and sometimes you don't, because on the next page that you were using for the fruits, the top of it is the forest offers much, like all those good things you said, but demands much too. And I definitely see that, like the desert, it's easier to just survive in this resourceless, vast wasteland that you're just staying alive because you don't have all the process that may be great once you get to the forest, but the effort to get there is tough, and you have to maintain that effort, and it's you can't always stay there. So maybe you go back and forth between these two depending on the project or the team members or the financial situation at your company, et cetera, et cetera.
It's interesting because they actually talk about how they've seen teams, and I've experienced this to some extent, where it was working great. They were in basically a forest. This is awesome. And like a team member left or a new person came in, or they didn't mention reorgs, but I'm going to say a reorg is the number one reason you go from a forest to a desert in my experience. Every time I've gotten a team working really nicely, a reorg happens, and then it is not nice anymore. And that kind of jives. I think in a lot of ways, the forest is about culture more than anything else. Like it's about developing, it's not about process, it's about culture. And there are a lot of companies out there I know that do put an emphasis on culture. I can say Netflix for sure. If you go to their jobs page, has a whole section on their culture, right? And I know that's true of a lot of the more successful companies out there. And the goal is like, this is my take. This is not a thing that's said in there. The culture thing and the thing I'm about to say is that it's about trust. You have to trust your systems. You have to trust the people you're working with. You have to trust, like your management chain to not yank the rug out from underneath you unnecessarily. Right? Trust is what leads to the forest, in my mind. And I kind of see that when I look at the roots on that same page of fruits and roots, because they have things in there like making time for learning and doing incremental design. Writing tests, having the programmers write the tests and actually doing the testing so they own it end to end. And my favorite part that I absolutely agree with as just a necessity in life is in the forest, no one works more than 40 hours in a week. And I think like that as a goal is such an important one because it stops meaning, hey, I'm trying to squeeze every bit of blood from this stone, and becomes, hey, let's treat our developers as people, recognize that a happier developer is a more productive developer, and studies have shown that. So I like a lot of where they're going with this. There's several pages that are behind a paywall that I haven't read, and I've skimmed quite a few of them and not read them in detail because I'm busy. I'm in a desert, man.
The forest feels like, I was going to say it feels like a place of privilege, or maybe, but maybe it's more of an earned thing. Like I said, you have to work at the forest, because like you said, it's culture, and it takes a different mindset that you want to make the software development environment you're in and the people in it to have that trust and to have that culture and have that community, so that you can get all those benefits of this setup or this framework. It takes time to work on that infrastructure. It's like you have to tend the garden or the plants in the forest to make sure they keep growing so that you keep getting the fruits of it. Whereas in the desert, you're getting stuff done, because you're moving and you're working 80 hours a week and you're squeezing the blood out of a stone and you're getting stuff done. But like, at what cost, and how long can you really go like that before you're burnt out or before you want to leave or before someone else wants to leave? So it's like, at some point you have to take a look at the desert and be like, wait, how long have we been going desert? How wouldn't it be nicer if we actually set down roots in this place and got some water and had some shade? It's almost like every one of those shows where people get stranded on an island and they start on the beach and then they realize that sitting around in the baking sun the whole time, yeah, they're surviving, they're staying alive, maybe help will come, but we've been here for a few weeks now. Maybe we should start looking for a cave, or maybe we should start looking for that forest.
I think survival is actually a really good way of looking at it, right? Or like, think about survival games. In a lot of survival games, you start off just trying to stay alive, right?
Right.
I got to find food. I got to find water. I got to find whatever. And that's your goal. That's your entire goal at the beginning of those, which is my least favorite part of those games. And then my favorite part of those games is where you start to go to kind of extend the analogy into a different thing that a different analogy that I like for this is you go from being a nomad to an agricultural society, right? You go from, I'm just living off what I have, that's fine, to planning ahead, right? And so like you go from this, oh my God, I have to pick these berries off this bush and eat them so I don't die tonight, to, hey, how could I like farm stuff here so it actually grows over time and I don't have to work as hard to get the food? Because then once you don't have to work as hard to get the food, then you have time to do other things. And once that's why I like automating everything in my real life. And there's a whole episode we did on like Factorio, I think, where we talk about that quite a bit. So I think that is a really good way of looking at it. I see two things that they talk about that I think are really key factors in the whole forest thing, which is the team has a common goal. I don't think that's always the case. I can say right now the team I'm on, through no fault of anyone's, just it happens to be the way that the people who formed this team, we came from different backgrounds and we're still like cleaning up some of the stuff that we were doing before. So we're all working on disparate things. It's very hard to get to a forest if you're not all working in the same direction. You can't help each other out as easily. It's hard to set priorities, lots of stuff. So if you have like everyone's working on this product or this thing, as opposed to I'm working on this, I'm working on this, I'm working on that, and like everyone is like siloed, I think that leads to it. And then the other one, and they don't call it out by this name, I think, but refactoring. But more importantly, the culture around refactoring. I have worked at companies where I have been the voice of the developers to the executive team in like an architecture role, and have had to fight to to make them understand why refactoring is important. I think we've done an episode on that as well.
Probably.
We're almost at 100. Pretty soon we'll be syndicated and it'll be great. Right. But like I've also worked at and I did manage to get through to them and time was made for it. I've also worked at places where without me ever saying anything, I have no idea what's going on above me because it's a bigger company. The execs have come down and said, this is a company goal to refactor, to get rid of technical debt specifically. And like, this is a goal that we have. We want you to spend time on this. This is as important as pushing out new features. If you have to pick one over the other, take longer to do the feature and get your technical debt out of the way. And I think that culture and the common goal thing are both really, really critical to what they're talking about with forest versus desert, and why I think it's very difficult for people to crawl out of the desert and into the forest. Yeah,
it definitely takes the whole group to agree on that, and and see that as a priority. And especially in a bigger company, it's harder to do that. It really has to come from the top down. It has to be like something, like you said, if you've got to prioritize, here are two options. Maybe spend a little more time on getting the infrastructure right. So, or, using a standard testing or linting or whatever, so that when we bring new people on, it's easier to onboard them. Or if you leave, it's easier for people to understand what you did, more standardization. But that has to be a priority. And if you're just, barely staying alive, it's harder to care about that stuff. I need these berries, like you said, to eat, to stay alive until tomorrow. If I get to tomorrow, then I'll think about farming. But I gotta get through the desert before I can get to the forest. And yeah, obviously this is a huge topic. But I think just in talking about this, I understand it better, and I understand how they both have pros and cons, and I can see how you could go back and forth between them, even on one team, one software project. It just depends on a lot of things. But yeah, any at least like closing thoughts just on kind of the general overview of this?
I like the approach that they took in this discussion, although I wish they did a little bit more. That there is value in both, right? And they do touch on it, but they're very much like, let's get to the forest. And I appreciate that, but I think it is important to know that like the desert is a valid place to work in. It's just not as enjoyable to work in or as fruitful as the forest. So let's all aspire to get to the forest.
Yeah, aspire to get to the forest, but like you said, I think there's value in the desert because you are. I think the desert often describes like crunch.
Yes.
In software development, especially like when you're making a game and you have a deadline in 3 months and everybody has to pitch in and do everything they can and burn out and they end up sleeping in the office. It's not good. It's not long-term maintainable. You can't keep that up forever. And so that's why I think the forest is an aspiration. And if you get to that point, it's going to be better, but it does take work and it does take effort and maintenance to keep it there. And so that's why it's worth it, because it takes effort, right?
Maintenance is a real key word there. I like it.
Yeah. Maintenance is tough, but it is necessary. Okay. Well, perhaps we will talk more about this forest desert concept in future episodes because it sounds pretty rad and there's lots of other related topics. But I think that wraps up this episode about forest versus desert of Hacking the Grepson. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to hear more of our discussions, you can get them at hackingthegrepson.com. We try to put out an episode every other week on Wednesday. And until the next time we talk at you, we now return you to your regularly scheduled lives already in progress.